ANEC Sports presents a Frick Media Productions, created by the founder and editor at the ANEC Network, Sam Frick. Now it's time to know your volleyball. Joining me is Joe Northern of SummitSports.com as we discuss another episode of Know Your Volleyball and recapping what happened in sectionals over the past week. Joe, you covered the sectional at Concordia and a very exciting sectional nonetheless. What are your takeaways from that sectional and anything else that stood out to you about this whole week as a whole?
I mean, I think not just with our first off, Sam, great to be back with you as always. But I think really the big thing that I look at from our sectional, I think it's I don't know if the word or term changing of the guard is appropriate because I still think there is a lot of energy really to be seen from these teams. If you thought it was exciting in 2025, I really think the energy of what we'll see in 26 could certainly match or even exceed that. But I do have to think, though, of the way of how the trajectory has been going for the past month. It doesn't surprise me that Bishop Dwinger not only ran to a sectional title, but simply just found a way to demolish through it thanks to an attacking method called the swarm method. And talking with Coach Danborn of really trying to go again for primary attackers. They went with that against Angola. They certainly did that against Concordia. Also, played the same team twice in 11 days and winning in sweep fashion certainly doesn't hurt either. I think, a lot of great action across the board, but I think Bishop Dwinger, if they can continue to find a way to swarm opponents rather quickly and finish their games in quick and successive fashion, they will be a hard out, at least coming out of sectional 21. However, that also being said, there have been some other sectionals that we saw quite a few surprises, some of which we may have teased last week here on the program, of teams that we did not expect to get to sectional victories, and some that we kind of expected to get to sectional victories, but in unsuspecting ways. So a lot of great action in the store, not just in sectional 21, but really across the board.
Yeah, that is for sure. And we had some first times in a while for some of these teams that are now heading to regionals on Saturday. First being in 1A, we have Northfield taking on Rossville, which is going to be at Elwood, which is in Madison County. Rossville's 29-3, Northfield 23-9. Emily Miller had a nice weekend at Northfield. They were the host, and she had 19 kills, 17 digs, I believe, in the comeback win against Southern Wells, where they were down 0-2 in that championship match. We're taking on Rossville 29-3 team. They're led by a freshman in Blair Wellman with 236 kills. Tori Fadness has 604 assists. And he got Canterbury. They win a sectional championship as well. They're going to be taking on Avery Veers and Triton. And that's going to be at Homestead, which is going to be right in the neighborhood for Canterbury. The Cavaliers winning a 5-set thriller against Lakewood Park. When you look at those two regionals, what are things stand out to you about those two particular matchups there? And do you like any chances for either of those two area teams to advance?
Well, first off, welcome to the party, Canterbury. Apparently, I forgot the invitation, in at least keeping all the stuff going on this season. But no, I love what Canterbury has done to get to the stage. And again, really the common themes of what we see of those area teams, 5-set thrillers. And we know Southern Wells was close to pulling off the upset. We know that didn't happen. So kudos to them as well. But I think, honestly, Northfield has a little bit of the edge inside compared to Canterbury. Full self-disclosure, I haven't had a chance to watch Canterbury as much this year as I would like. But I do think they will have a strong task against Triton. But I think if I had to choose one or the other, Northfield has a little bit more of an edge.
Yeah, Northfield's a dangerous 1A team. I know the record doesn't show that, but they play in a tough Three Rivers conference that has Southwood and Wabash and I'm forgetting Team Manchester in that conference. Those three had great seasons from Wabash County. So Northfield definitely going to be a team to watch in the 1A state tournament. Canterbury, led by Victoria King, solid team, but Triton's going to be a pretty tough out in that regional hosted by Homestead. Speaking of Southwood, we look at 2A. I would say one of the top matches in all the states. It's going to be against Wapahani, Southwood, the host of that matchup. Two state-ranked teams. Wapahani's in the Muncie area. We know how Muncie is when it comes to volleyball and whatnot. Lakeland is going to be going to Northwood. They'll take on the Jimmies, a Jimtown team with only 14 wins on the season. They beat Bremen, their arch nemesis, in 5 sets in that matchup. In South Adams, winning their first sectionals 2022, 25-8 on the season. They'll be taking on a solid Boone Road team from the northwestern part of the state. I will tell you this, Joe. Jimtown, I think, is a very tough 14-win team. They played a pretty difficult schedule of their own, but I like Lakeland's chances in that regional. I think South Adams has a decent chance against Boone Grove. And then Southwood Wapahani is a coin toss, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning in that aspect too. Again, Southwood, just really just kind of one of those teams that'll always find a way to stick around and stay at the top of the table no matter who you're facing off against. So I think regardless, they're going to be a tough out. And I think, again, I'm not going to speculate in the sectional above that because Sheridan Benton Central looks like a better game on paper than what you think. So I'm going to be interested to see, should Southwood get that win, who they would face off against. But as far as Lakeland and South Adams, really specifically South Adams, if the cards fall correctly, I don't see a situation where they're not going to go to a semi-state final on the first. I love what this team has done. I really love what this team has done since the Heritage loss back on September 18th, and has really done a good job of at least trying to, get your core young team fired up. And we said that, hey, which team is going to show up today? We saw that against Woodland last Saturday. We've seen them continually develop and just find ways to really pick out the mistakes that we've seen from them early on. So I really, really like the Starfire team. I think Lakeland or Jimtown will be a tough matchup for them no matter what, but I like the Starfire to really shine at this point.
Yeah, you got the Bullenbacher sisters there. You got the Beitler girls there. It's a family of South Adams athletes there, and they've done a nice job with that program over the years. And then you got Shania Ramey, the Kentucky commit, and Southwood looking to avenge the loss from Webo last year in semi-state. I know that loss still resonates a little bit in their minds a little bit. They still remember that loss a little bit. So I'm sure there's motivation going into that matchup against Wapahani, a very good Wapahani team that beat Muncie Burris in sectionals down in Madison Grant. You look at Class 3A, two very interesting matchups here. First at Southwood with West Lafayette, once again back in regionals, taking on Bishop Dwayne. Dwayne with a gritty performance over the weekend, defeating Angola in 4 sets, led by, despite the vet Maya Harris, who had 38 kills and 20 dids against East Snowball in a 5-set thriller. She had 28 kills in the loss to Dwayne. Dwayne still able to win the match in 4 sets and then swept a young but solid Concordia team nonetheless. West Lafayette, they got weapons. They nearly won the regional last year against Angola. We know West Lafayette's going to be a dangerous team once again from the Hoosier Conference. And you look at Hamilton Heights and Norwell. We mentioned that section on Newcastle could be difficult. Hamilton Heights had to battle through 5 sets to get past Newcastle, and then won 3 pretty close sets against Jay County, a pretty good Jay County team nonetheless. But unfortunately for Hamilton Heights, they got to go all the way to Norwell to take on the Norwell Knights. 28-5 are the Norwell Knights. Probably their winningest season in program history are the Norwell Knights. Their first sectional championships 2006. And Joe, surprise, surprise, they did not have to go to 5 sets against Heritage this time around. It was a 3-set sweep, and they were, Norwell didn't have all the cards, healthy, so to speak, but Norwell still played really well, led by Emma Machon and Macy Salfrank.
I mean, again, those are really 2 of the key players that I always look at that have continued to make an impact for this Norwell team, and also too, I know we were trying to follow that as we were doing our game between Dwenger and Concordia, and I didn't get a chance to get to the scores, but I was watching that a little bit during the timeouts, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is happening. This is happening. And also too, I think it's just really the team chemistry that they've been able to build off against each other. And one of the questions I mentioned last week was, do they have what it takes to win the big game? Clearly, they might have listened to us and have played that on a loop. Who knows? But the answer was yes. Yes, they did, obviously, against Heritage. And I, again, just really love what I've seen. Plus, too, they don't have to go far. They'll just have to go down a couple county roads to Zion and host that home game, which I think is going to be an electric crowd for the Knights in the early window. Or I believe it's the late window on Saturday on this coming Saturday. Yep, they got the first. They got the early game, the 4 o'clock game.
Yeah, it's the early game. Yeah.
So they got the early game on that. I think Hamilton Heights is going to pose a really good challenge for them. I think again, they are kind of a grittier team that had to kind of go a little bit through the ringers. So I wonder if you have some of that momentum still sticking on through the week, if that's going to stay with you, or if you just be a goldfish and then come out and reset. I think really at this point, every game you play, every match you play, you got to be a goldfish. But I do like Norwell's chances in this one. I think it would be awfully intriguing if we did get a West Lafayette Bishop Dwenger semi-state semifinal. But I don't know. I think this is the kind of the tale of experience could stand out a little bit more to me in my eyes than not. And I think, and again, I mentioned this with Bishop Dwenger. Did they have what it takes to win the big games? And we started seeing them win those bigger games coming up later in the season, but also in commanding fashion. I think the key is if West Lafayette can go to 4 with Dwenger, I think they can get it done. Dwenger is just going to have to swarm the front line over and over and over again. That was kind of their ticket to success from what we've seen the past couple of nights in sectional 21. So if they can find a way to swarm, I like the Saints' chances. But again, West Lafayette, if you play long with Dwenger, I do notice the gas kind of runs out a little bit from time to time. So they have gotten some 5-set victories, don't get me wrong. But I think they're a team that if you don't win it in the first hour 15, you like your chances to really play the long game against the Saints. So that's at least my take with it. But I think, I wouldn't be surprised if we had Norwell Dwenger a week and a half from now, but I also wouldn't be surprised if one of those teams or none of those teams made it over, just again, because of how new they are to this day. Well, I say new. Bishop Dwenger, first time that they've been at this stage since 2020, which we know what happened that year en route to a Class 3 title. But again, completely different teams, completely different squads. I do like Norwell better to come out of that, though, just because they have the championship experience on the hoop side. And translating that to volleyball, I think, can only, just really go with that same mentality.
All right. So as far as the West Lafayette game goes, if you remember last year, West Lafayette won the first 2 sets, if I recall, against Angola, and Angola made a valiant effort to win that match in 5 sets. I don't think Dwenger has the same type of weapons as Angola did last year, and even this year on some level. So they can't fall behind against West Lafayette. They are a very talented West Lafayette team, and then they got a basketball powerhouse of their own. So I think for Dwenger, they definitely want to get up to a good start. You can't fall behind against this West Lafayette team, even in sets. You don't want to fall too far behind against that team. As far as Norwell is concerned, I do agree. They do have the championship spirits. And I think being at home does matter. The Castle's a very good atmosphere at Norwell, regardless of sports there. And so I think it's going to be a good matchup. I think it's going to be a good test for Hamilton Knights. And I think 3 is also kind of opened up a little bit in 3A North because of Northwood defeating West Snowball in the sectional championship game. By the way, congratulations to Northwood. A nice performance for them. Nice all-around effort for them. Yep, congratulations to the Northwood Panthers on winning their 7th straight sectional championship. They got Hanover Central, which Northwood's the host of that regional. We look at 4A, and this is going to be a fascinating 4A regional. Penn and Warsaw, big rivalry in the Michiana era. They're going to Culver. These two played in a 5-set thriller in the regular season. Penn winning that one in 5. Carroll will take on Harrison at Homestead. Carroll's 33-0. Harrison from West Lafayette. Nice team of their own going to Homestead. And they got Westfield, the Shamrocks, defeating Hamilton Southeastern in their sectional. They're 25-1. They're going to make the long drive on I-69 up to Norwell and take on the Belmont Braves. That's the second game at Norwell. I think Westfield will be heavily favored in that match against Belmont, but the Braves have shown that they have been a battle-tested team over the course of the season, playing the teams like Westfield and Yorktown, all those tough schools in the state. So Belmont's going to give them their best. Carroll's going to obviously be favored against a pretty solid Harrison team. But I think Penn Warsaw, to me, is one of the best matchups that we have talked about up to this point.
I think so too. And I mean, it's not to knock, obviously, on the Carroll Harrison or Belmont Westfield matchups, but I think Penn Warsaw, I'm going back and watching some of that tape over and over. I think you can tell that these are both battle-tested teams that just quite simply do not care for each other when it comes to the court. Maybe cordial off it, but whenever it's on the court, everything is fair game. And I think, that can give them a really good inside edge of what's to come. But again, keep in mind, beyond that, they're going to have a winner of Chesterton and Crown Point, which is another daunting task that could potentially lie ahead for the winner of this one. So as we mentioned, even top of the season, Class 4, there are no free lunches. There are no guarantees whatsoever. But if I feel like anything could be close to a near guarantee, I do like Carroll again over Harrison. Really, again, they kind of play a very good swarm style, but make it look like clockwork, quite frankly, at the end of the day. So I think the Chargers, again, going to be heavily favored against Harrison. I like for them to move on. Belmont Westfield, I think, let's just talk about the good for what Belmont did last week at first, just because coming back down from the brink 2-0 against a very, very good Homestead team, and then just running the table in that sectional, to get to this final. This is a team that, again, midway through the season, we had a lot more questions to ask about Belmont versus now what we know about them. Again, a team not at a higher level than what we've seen previously from the Braves. But again, you make the jump to Class 4, it's always going to be some growing pains no matter what. And also losing Alyssa Gumbel at the beginning of the season, too, before the season, rather, it showed really how can the Braves regroup. And certainly, again, you can never count out Coach Kroll in any situation whatsoever. But I do think, though, Westfield has a little bit of an inside edge. I would say if there's a 1A, a 1, 2, 3 for me, at least of teams that I'm looking at right now, or 1, 2, 3, 4, I should say. I like Westfield kind of in my top 4 in Class 4 at the moment, just because, I mean, 25-1, but again, just a dominant schedule, dominant attackers up front for the Rocks, as the logo likes to call it. So I could definitely see them being a little bit of a tough out. I would love the Belmont upset, but I think Westfield's got an inside track.
Yeah, and I do want to make sure we mention the young kids at Belmont like Coulter and Rids and
Yes.
Taylor Sutter, right? Those kids really stepped up in those moments when they had to go through without Lissa Gumbel for Belmont. And obviously Mary Kate Scheimer, regardless how things go against Westfield, amazing career for Mary Kate Scheimer going to
Absolutely.
Purdue. Maya Harris's career just came to an end in Angola. She's going to Illinois. So it really, we've been blessed with amazing talent all across the board and whatnot. And I want to go back to Warsaw real quick because Warsaw, we knew they were going to win the sectional, but it was just a matter of how much they win or how much they win by in that sectional. That semifinal game against Concord, I figured would be a trap game for Warsaw. And Concord won that first set against Warsaw. And I thought, I wonder how Warsaw responds back from that. And they did so very nicely. Radiant Edwards had a really nice Saturday in the sectional against both Concord and Elkhart. I thought Maddie Williamson played very well against the Concord Minutemen as well. We talked a lot about CC Good and Hepler, right? But those other girls really kind of elevated their game when they needed the most. And so I think the depth of Warsaw is going to be a big key as the Warsaw Tigers are seeking their first regional championship since the single class era back in 1996. So it's been a long time for the Warsaw Tigers. They're going to have to earn it against a really good Penn team. And I think it's going to be a matchup of who can serve the ball well, who can make the least amount of mistakes. And, fatigue's going to be a factor at this point in the season. Which team can get those defensive stops when they get those second chance points that they need to. I think those are things to look at when we look at that Warsaw Penn matchup because they're so evenly matched. It's going to come down to the thinnest of margins between these two teams and whatnot.
And I think you got to, as you said it best, you got to have a perfect serving day. But I think also, too, the depth is going to play a difference on how many people can quickly, be efficient when it comes to serving out to begin with. So, again, not going to make any predictions on this, but I think it will come down to depth. It'll come down to what little can you do to mess up moving forward. So I think in terms of games this coming weekend, that is probably the one to watch. I would say of the local teams of interest, I should say. Obviously, support all your teams no matter where you're watching, of course. But I think that 7 o'clock window at Culver will be certainly fairly interesting.
All right, last question from me, Joe. Is you will not be on our next talk about semi-state as far as I know. So I'll kind of give you, so my storylines would kind of be combining regionals and then kind of what could happen in semi-state, depending on how far these teams could go, right? We're at this point in the season now where storylines are starting to develop. We have teams that maybe have not been there in a long time. We have teams that have come in with some form of chip on their shoulder, maybe some motivation from last season and whatnot. What are some things you're most looking forward to over the next week or 2 weeks to see who gets their ticket to Gainbridge Fieldhouse?
Well, I would say looking to get the ticket is going to be a matter of experience, I think, is going to be the one word that I'm going to go to. Because from what we've seen previously, experience counts. Experience is counted to get into the stage at the regional level. And for the most part, we've seen teams that have been there before make a run and get to a run. But also, too, we've seen some teams that have been new to this stage. And how well can you handle the pressure? How well have you learned over the past month or so to be at this stage and be at this moment? And I think, again, for some of the teams like a South Adams and like a Bishop Dwenger, you go on the calendar and you take a look at, okay, is this team really for real? What's going on here? South Adams, I mentioned, I go back to the Heritage game where they were this close of going for the reverse sweep, but Heritage eventually ultimately winning that one. Norwell, again, a team that has had an amazing season this year, but interestingly enough, the 2 games that we had with them on the air, or the 3 games we had with them on the air, 1-2 on the season. So I'm trying to win the big conference opponent games and a game against another Class 3 foe in Bishop Dwingers. So I guess it's the question of experience. Do you have what it takes to win the big game? And do you have trust in your teammates? If you have all three of those working in your favor, I think the opportunities are endless. But I think in terms of the team that I could see playing for a semi, or at least teams that I feel that could be playing for a semi-state final. Um, on the first, I like South Adams' chance the best. I think they have probably the deeper bench out of anybody in Class 2. In Class 2A, at least comparatively of what that would look like. I think a Southwood South Adams matchup would be really, really spicy for the semi-state final. In Class 3, I think Carroll can just continue to hold the ship steering. I mean, you did have the one loss to Roncalli in the last game of the regular season. Big whoop, you're still 33-0. But I think if you can find a way to continue to push things forward and really try to get over the hump in what very well could be a good Westfield team, and see if we get a Crown Point Chesterton semi-state final, because I think the winner of Penn State Warsaw, that's going to be a tough one to get past, I think. So I wouldn't guarantee that Warsaw would go all the way to a semi-state final. I would love that personally, but I think at this point, I want to see good matches. That's the big thing. I want to see very good matches and see these teams just continue to compete point after point, grit after grit, because again, those gritty games are a lot more fun. Really, to sit and watch as a fan. They're really fun just to see how the dynamics can change in a flick of an instant. And I know we were fortunate enough to see a lot of that last weekend. And I know, obviously, my colleagues over the next couple of weeks will have the chance to see that. I will not be a part of that this week due to some other obligations I've got coming up for the next couple of weekends. But I know we're going to be in store for some really good volleyball.
Mm-hmm. This is the first time I've ever heard a Penn State mistake with Penn before. So kind of an interesting reference there
Yes.
with Penn State. So, hey, I guess that's acknowledgement there. I think my last point here is I think I'm keeping an eye on what's going on with Carroll and Southwood. Going into the season, I think those two and then and goal, I think were the three big storylines going into the season. And now that Carroll and Southwood advanced past sectionals, I'm curious to see how far they can go and get their tickets to Gainbridge Hill, especially for Southwood, a team that came so close last year and having won the state year before. I know that there's definitely some motivation for the seniors at Southwood to get it done this season. And then Carroll trying to chase perfection, which is rarely ever done in the sport of volleyball before. And even though Hamilton Southeastern is out in the playoffs, this is still far from over because you still got Westfield in there and you got Yorktown on the other half of the bracket and whatnot. So you don't know what could happen in the state tournament. So there's just so much we still would love to know over the next couple of weeks.
Absolutely. And I think, that's the joy of just the sport, because again, one moment you could be at the top of the world. The next moment you could be swept out 3-0. And I think that's something we're going to have to keep our eyes on, not only this week with regionals, but then through the semi-state rounds coming up. So I would be very interested to see if Carroll can continue to chase perfection. I think they have a good path of doing so, but I think it is going to come down to really those games next. If they get past Harrison, what those games will look like in the next 2 to 3 weeks, 2 weeks after, not 2 to 3 weeks, 2 weeks after. See, I'm already thinking ahead. I'm already ready to at least go out of office for a hot second. But I can tell you, again, the chase for perfection is one of the toughest things. But again, Coach Pandy Signage and company have said never settle, and they have not done that at all this season. So I think if you can find a way to run the table, that's certainly it can be done. It can be done, but you got to have at least the motivation to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Be a
They certainly
goldfish.
have it. Yeah, they certainly have a chance to do so. All right, Joe, thank you for taking the time to talk some volleyball. All right, so good luck with your obligations coming up in the next week or so, and good luck to all our area teams that are going to be playing regionals on Saturday. So tune in next time when we discuss and talk about knowing your volleyball.